Found the stone by accident. Just a jagged slab of granite, half buried near a dry streambed deep in Colorado's San Juan Mountains. No trail nearby, no signs of recent human movement. But what caught the ranger's eye wasn't the rock itself. It was what was carved into it. Crude letters, shaky but deliberate, etched with something sharp and desperate. If you're reading this, I've already lost too much blood. Tell my brother I forgive him. No name, no date, just that message, chiseled into stone like a confession. At first, authorities assumed it was a prank. Maybe something left behind by a backcountry camper with a dark sense of humor. But as the ranger radioed it in, another discovery changed everything. Less than 30 yards away, hidden beneath a collapsed pine, was a Today RN backpack. Inside, a waterlogged field notebook, a cracked compass, and a faded Colorado ID belonging to Nolan Drake, age 34, last seen 6 months earlier. A skilled hiker, former Air Force, vanished during what was supposed to be a solo 3-day trek through the high alpine backcountry. His disappearance hadn't made national news, just a local bulletin, a few missing posters, a short-lived volunteer search. Most assumed he slipped, got lost, or met a bear. But now, with that message in stone and a body still unfound, the question shifted. What really happened out there? And who was the brother he couldn't forgive? Until it was almost too late. To the outside world, Nolan Drake was the kind of guy people trusted with their life. Clean-cut, ex-military, dependable. The sort of person who showed up early, stayed late, and didn't complain. He'd served 8 years in the Air Force, mostly as a rescue specialist, then worked as a wilderness survival instructor just outside Durango. He was the guy who rescued people. So when he disappeared on his own hike in the fall of 2023, those who knew him struggled to believe it. Not because he wasn't capable, but because he wouldn't have made the mistakes most hikers do. He didn't forget water. He didn't take uncharted paths. He didn't panic, which made his disappearance that much more chilling. Nolan's last known location was a trailhead near Ice Lake Basin, a stunning high-elevation loop in the San Juan Range. Rugged, remote, but still a popular route for seasoned hikers. He'd told his roommate, a firefighter named Joel, that he was planning a 3-day solo reset, just me, the air, and some space to think. Joel didn't press further. He assumed Nolan was just dealing with post-service burnout or job stress. What he didn't know was that Nolan had been carrying something heavier than his gear. A fractured relationship with his younger brother, Trevor. The two had grown up inseparable, the kind of brothers who shared everything. Bedroom walls, bikes, even birthdays, just 2 years apart. But that changed in 2020, after an argument that neither ever spoke about again. Not with friends. Not with family. They just stopped talking. At Nolan's last birthday party, Trevor didn't show up. When their mother died in 2022, Nolan came to the funeral alone. No one knew why. But 2 days before Nolan's hike, he received a voicemail from Trevor. The transcript, later pulled by investigators, was short and uneasy. "Hey, I don't know if you'll even listen to this, but I'm in Durango for a few days. I've been thinking about Mom a lot lately. If you're still mad, I get it. But I hope you're not. If you want to meet, I'll be here until Thursday." Nolan never called him back. Instead, he packed his bag, left a note for Joel saying he'd be off-grid, and disappeared into the Rockies. Whether to clear his head, or avoid a confrontation, no one knows for sure. But what's undeniable is that he never came back. The storm that rolled in on day 2 of his trip was one of the worst that autumn, dropping 18 inches of snow overnight. Search crews didn't go out until days later. By then, the mountains had already buried their secrets. Now, with his pack recovered and a message carved into stone, a new theory began to surface. Nolan didn't just vanish. He might have known he wouldn't survive, and he chose that place to say goodbye. The search and rescue team that revisited Nolan's last known route wasn't looking for hope. Not anymore. After 6 months, hope had hardened into something else. Resolution. Closure. Or at least, something the family could bury. But what they found instead was a trail, deliberate, methodical, and silent. Objects, spaced across miles, left behind like breadcrumbs in the wilderness. Not scattered. Not dropped. Placed. It began with a water bottle, sitting upright beneath a rock ledge near a narrow bend in the trail. Still sealed, still full. 500 yards later, a folded topographic map, tucked beneath a pine branch, marked with faint pencil lines veering away from the standard trail. Another quarter-mile in, his emergency fire starter kit, laid out beside a collapsed log like it had been set down for someone to find. One by one, Nolan's gear told a story. A trail that didn't loop back. A path that led deeper into the unknown, not out. None of the items showed signs of weather damage or animal interference. It was as if he wanted someone, anyone, to follow. But there was something else. At each site where gear was left, there were faint carvings in the bark of nearby trees. Slashes. Tally marks. Sometimes 3. Sometimes 5. Sometimes a single one, circled. Cryptic, but intentional. Ranger Hale, who had recovered the backpack and stone carving earlier, believed the marks weren't just tracking time or distance. I think he was counting decisions, he said. Moments where he had to choose. Go left, go right, go forward, or go back. But Nolan never went back. Instead, his trail curved toward a ridge known by locals as Devil's Spine, a razorback stretch of shale and snow prone to sudden rockslides. Few hikers take that route, even in summer. But at its base, Hale's team found something else Nolan had left behind. His compass, cracked but still functioning. Placed on a flat rock, it pointed south, but the trail wound west. That detail rattled Hale. It meant Nolan had deliberately walked against the direction of safety, turning away from where other hikers might go. As if he didn't want to be found, or wanted to reach something he'd only told himself about. What was he chasing? Solitude? Forgiveness? Punishment? Further along the ridge, the searchers came across a scrap of notebook paper, half-torn, caught in the bark of a dead tree. Written in pencil and faded by wind, it read, "It wasn't just about us." He knew. He always knew. No signature. No explanation. Just more questions. Investigators sent the handwriting to analysts, who later confirmed it was Nolan's. But who was he? His brother Trevor? Someone from the military? Or something Nolan had encountered in the wild? Something that pushed him past survival into surrender? The deeper they followed the trail, the more personal it became. Nolan wasn't just lost. He was telling a story, one the mountains never meant to share. About 2 miles past where they found the compass, the terrain sharpened. The path faded into uneven granite slabs broken by frost heaves and long dead tree roots. The air grew thin, the winds stronger, carrying with them the high-altitude silence that swallows even a human scream. And it was there, on the narrowest part of Devil's Spine, that the search team found the first undeniable proof that Nolan Drake had been injured. At the base of a fractured rock ledge, a jagged stain ran several feet down the stone. Dark, dried blood, faded by time but unmistakable. A few feet away, hidden in the shadows beneath a granite overhang, lay a torn strip of dark fabric, later matched to Nolan's hiking pants. Next to it, a single hiking pole, snapped in two. Not broken by force, but bent, as if used to brace a fall. The terrain above showed signs of a minor rockslide. Hale crouched at the site and ran a gloved hand across the edge. It came back with dried flakes. Red. Dusty. Weathered. The blood trail moved erratically from that point, dragging in places, vanishing in others, but reappearing almost a quarter-mile farther down near a dry creek bed. The same creek where the carved stone was eventually found. From a survival standpoint, the decision to descend the ridge while injured made sense. Follow gravity, seek water, shelter in the crevices. But this wasn't a survivalist's pattern. This was something else. Something more symbolic. As Hale's team examined the stone with Nolan's message, they noticed subtle marks around the etching. Tiny notches scratched into the stone's edges, 7 of them, all facing the same direction. It was as if he were marking time. Days, maybe, or decisions, or regrets. Some believed the blood loss Nolan mentioned in his final carving was the result of the fall. But others, especially Hale, weren't convinced. If he was losing blood fast enough to write that, Hale later said, he shouldn't have been able to carve a message that clean, that controlled. That took time. That took strength. Which tells me he'd been there a while. Even more disturbing was what they found buried beneath the stone. A small dugout, no more than a foot deep. Inside it, a photo, creased and stained, showing two boys standing in front of a canoe at a lake. One clearly older. One clearly younger. Both smiling, arms around each other's shoulders. On the back of the photo, in smudged pen, Boundary Waters. 97, me and Trev. The image broke Hale. It was the first time in years that the two brothers had appeared together. And the placement of the photo, beneath the message of forgiveness, made the scene feel less like a place of death and more like a memorial. A man trying to say something final. Something he hadn't been able to speak in life. Why here? Why the carving? Why not use the journal they found in the backpack? Why destroy everything else but preserve this one image? Some say Nolan had accepted his death and wanted to leave behind a piece of truth. Others think something, or someone, was with him in those last hours. Watching. Waiting. Making sure the message reached the surface only after Nolan was gone. For months, Trevor Drake refused to speak publicly about his brother's disappearance. When approached by reporters after Nolan was first declared missing, he offered only a clipped response, "We weren't close anymore. That's all I'll say." But once the message carved into stone was released, and the photo from the Boundary Waters unearthed, he broke his silence. Not with the press, but with investigators. What he told them rewrote everything people thought they knew about Nolan's journey into the wild. According to Trevor, the two brothers had grown apart gradually after Nolan's discharge from the Air Force. Nolan had returned from service quieter, more withdrawn, haunted by something he never put into words. He drank more, spoke less, and often disappeared on weekend solo hikes without telling anyone where he was going. He didn't want help, Trevor said. He wanted to disappear, piece by piece. The final break came in 2020, just after their mother had been diagnosed with terminal pancreatic cancer. Trevor claimed he had found a letter, written by their mother and addressed to Nolan. In it, she confessed to something neither brother had ever suspected. Trevor's biological father wasn't who they thought. He wasn't their father at all. He was a man their mother had been involved with briefly before marrying the man who raised them. Nolan had always been the real son in their dad's eyes. Trevor had never known. The letter had been meant for Nolan's eyes only. But Trevor read it. And when he confronted Nolan about it, things exploded. He blamed me for reading something that wasn't mine, Trevor said. Said I had no right to it. But I think it scared him. I think it made him feel like everything we grew up with, family, loyalty, brotherhood, was a lie. They stopped speaking after that fight. Even when their mother died a year later, they sat on opposite sides of the funeral parlor. Trevor didn't approach him. Nolan left without saying a word. But something changed the week before Nolan vanished. Trevor said he'd been trying to make peace. That's why he came to Durango. He'd heard Nolan was still working near there and hoped to talk in person. He left the voicemail. Waited. No answer. Then Nolan disappeared. Trevor insists he had nothing to do with his brother's death. And investigators found no evidence linking him to foul play. His alibi checked out. No DNA, no tracks, no sightings. But what lingered, and still does, is the idea that Nolan's final trek wasn't an accident, or even a survival test. It may have been a pilgrimage of pain, to process a lifetime of identity, betrayal, and broken bloodlines. And yet, Nolan forgave him. That's what the stone says. That's what his final gesture meant. But if that's true, why did he hide it all so carefully? Why vanish so completely, leaving only slivers of himself behind in the snow? Unless, as Hale would later wonder, Nolan didn't just go up into the Rockies to die. He went there to transform into something remembered only by the land. The backpack had been exposed to months of weather. Snow, melt, rain, wind. Its nylon fabric was torn in places, discolored by mildew, and stiff with mud. Most of the contents were ruined. Food wrappers dissolved into mush. A flare gun rusted shut. A compass needle frozen in place. But buried deep in a zippered side pocket, protected inside a plastic bag, was Nolan's field notebook. It shouldn't have survived. The bag was punctured. The seams leaked. But somehow, most of the pages, faintly smudged, brittle from damp, were still legible. And what they contained wasn't a standard trail journal. No weather logs. No map notes. No camp sketches. Just a series of fragmented paragraphs, written in uneven script, dated sporadically, some with no date at all. Almost as if Nolan had been documenting moments, not days. Psychological flashpoints. Spiritual observations. Or possibly, warnings. The entries began normally enough. Day 1. Entered trail late. Feet good. Air feels sharp but clean. This place is quiet in a way that makes the chest ache. I like it. Then, a shift. Day 2. Storm came through faster than forecast said. Spent night under rock shelf. Couldn't sleep. Heard movement just after dark. Not wind. Something closer. Could be elk. By the third entry, his tone had changed. The writing was sharper, the spacing between words irregular. Something followed me after Devil's Spine. I left the trail. I know. But I had to. There was a voice, or a feeling of a voice. I couldn't explain it. Like static in my teeth. Investigators marked that line with red ink. It wasn't uncommon for hikers under stress to experience mild hallucinations, especially at altitude, especially with injuries or low hydration. But Nolan's entries were too consistent to dismiss. Found the place I saw in the dream. Dead tree split at the base, creek curling around it like a finger. There's a stone there. Flat. Black. I don't know why I came here. Then came the most disturbing note, written on the last semi-intact page. If he sees this, tell him I did what I could. I carried the guilt into the mountains because I couldn't carry it any further. I didn't run from him. I ran from what we made. If something finds this, let it be known, I forgave. There was no signature. The handwriting on that final entry matched the carving on the stone. Forensic analysts concluded both were written by Nolan, within days, or possibly hours, of his death. But what disturbed Hale and his team wasn't just the message. It was the recurring mention of something, as if Nolan felt he wasn't alone. Not just metaphorically. Literally. And that detail echoed in a final, chilling piece of evidence. Inside the notebook, between two pages that had partially fused together from moisture, investigators found a pressed flower, flattened, perfectly intact, with dark violet petals and spiny leaves. Botanists later confirmed the plant was Delphinium glaucum, a rare high-mountain larkspur. Highly toxic. Not normally picked by experienced hikers. Why had Nolan preserved it? Some believed it was symbolic. A final artistic gesture. Others believed it was a suicide marker, a known nod among some survivalists, meant to signify acceptance of death in the wilderness. But Hale had another theory. He left it as a warning, he said. Not for his brother. Not for us. But for whatever he thought was following him. It's as if he was saying, I see you. I know how this ends. And I'm not afraid. 3 weeks after the last official search concluded, Ranger Hale returned to the site on his own. He told no one. Not the department. Not the press. Not even the search volunteers who had combed Devil's Spine with him during the primary recovery operation. Something about the scene had continued to gnaw at him. The way the stone with Nolan's message was placed, the unnatural spacing of the blood trail, the eerie feeling that Nolan had been guided, not just wandering. He set out before dawn, carrying only what he needed. Thermal gear, satellite GPS, his journal, and a weatherproof GoPro strapped to his shoulder. He reached the carved stone by early afternoon. The air was colder than he remembered, the wind whistling louder through the trees, like a voice carrying across an empty canyon. This time, Hale didn't look at the stone. He looked under it. Bending beside the slab, He removed a few layers of leaves and pine needles. The stone had been heavy, too heavy to move easily without tools. But he wedged it loose using a pry bar and a branch. Beneath it, he found what he hadn't dared to hope for. A hollow, not dug by hand but seemingly carved by erosion. About 2 feet wide, just deep enough for someone to crawl into and hide. Inside was a makeshift nest of sorts. A compact pile of torn fabric, bits of moss, and a crushed emergency blanket. On top of the pile lay a single object. A small metal dog tag, corroded and scratched, but still legible. Drake, Nolan J. USAF Rescue Ops. Blood type, O-N-E-G. Do not resuscitate. This wasn't the same tag Nolan's military record listed when he was declared missing. It was older, outdated, a duplicate, or a backup he'd kept hidden. Beneath the dog tag, Hale found something far stranger. A symbol, scratched faintly into the stone floor of the hollow. It wasn't letters, not numbers, just a strange pattern, almost like a rune. A circle broken at the top, with 3 lines radiating downward like tree roots or claws. It didn't match any known survival marks. Hale took a photo, then did something that surprised even himself. He left the site and told no one. Not right away. Instead, he drove the photos and field notes to a retired linguistics professor from Fort Lewis College, someone who had assisted on previous wilderness investigations involving native inscriptions and historic symbols. The professor examined the carving and said it didn't match anything indigenous, but there were mythic parallels. Old ones. It resembles what's known in folklore as a watcher's mark, she said. A symbol left to mark a place where someone believed they were being observed. It's found in European lore, not local. The last time I saw something similar was in an Alpine manuscript involving lost climbers who swore something was following them in the fog. Only one came back. She paused before adding, he died in an asylum. The last thing he drew before he passed was that symbol. Hale didn't believe in ghost stories. But standing in the woods, staring down into that hollow, it no longer felt like folklore. It felt intentional. Whatever Nolan had encountered in those final days, whether it was trauma, isolation, or something unexplainable, he had marked that spot for a reason. Not just to be found, but to be understood. And yet the question remained. Why leave a symbol no one would recognize, unless it was meant for something else? The GoPro recovered from Nolan's backpack was never expected to work. It had been exposed to months of snow, rain, and extreme temperature swings. Its outer casing was cracked, the lens fogged with moisture. But when technicians at the Forensic Audio Lab in Denver removed the memory card, they found something astonishing, one remaining file. Corrupted, partially overwritten, but still extractable. The footage had no video, just a black screen, likely due to lens damage, but the audio track survived. The timestamp placed it on the 3rd day of Nolan's hike, less than 12 hours after the blood trail began and a full day before the carved stone was believed to have been made. The recording begins with wind, sharp and persistent, threading through trees like thin wire. Then, the rustle of Nolan's coat. A long pause. Then a faint voice. I've left the trail. I'm not sure how long I've been off it. Maybe 6 hours. Maybe more. I think something's wrong with my leg. Shaky breathing. I fell. Slid maybe 30 feet. I don't remember hitting bottom. But I woke up cold and bleeding. I'm using this to stay awake. If this is found, this is Nolan Drake. I'm not lost. I made choices. I need that to be clear. A loud gust of wind interrupts. Then silence for nearly 2 minutes. When Nolan speaks again, his voice is lower. Measured. Almost detached. I saw someone last night. Or I think I did. Standing between the trees. Didn't speak. Didn't move. Thought it was a hallucination. But it's not the first time. Not the first place I've seen it. Not just here. Another gust. The wind grows louder, more violent. And then, a new sound. Clicking. Rapid. Irregular. Like stone tapping stone. At first faint. Then closer. Nolan's breathing grows shallow. It's following me. Not footsteps. Not a person. A presence. I don't know what it wants. I've made peace. With Trevor. With everything. If this is punishment, so be it. I'll leave a message. I'll make sure it's found. But I'm not dying scared. I won't. The final seconds are overlaid with a harsh scraping sound, metallic and uneven, possibly the beginning of his attempt to carve the stone. Then, the recording ends. Experts cleaned the audio, ran spectrographic analysis, and ruled out most natural causes for the tapping. No matching patterns for tree branches, falling rocks, or wildlife activity. The sounds were too rhythmic, too persistent, as if someone, or something, was moving just outside his field of view. But the mystery didn't end there, because just before the final static cut off, someone in the lab caught a faint anomaly, a whisper-like tone, deep in the background. It was sent through filtering, amplified, and enhanced. Only 2 words could be distinguished with any confidence. You knew. The team debated whether it was Nolan's own voice, an echo, a mutter. But linguists concluded the tone was not consistent with his speech pattern. It was lower, foreign, whispered. Ranger Hale, upon hearing the final playback, left the room and didn't return for over an hour. When asked later what he believed the voice meant, he said, "I think Nolan went up there to bury something, and I think it followed him back." When the story broke, Hiker's final words etched into stone, it spread quickly. National media picked it up within days. The carved message, the recovered dog tag, the cryptic notebook, the whisper on the audio, all of it made for a compelling headline. But for those who had known Nolan Drake, the coverage felt hollow. They didn't see a ghost story. They saw a man struggling under the weight of grief, guilt, and identity. A veteran who had survived war zones only to vanish in his own backyard. His brother Trevor, shaken by the recovered messages and the carved forgiveness, gave one televised interview before disappearing from public view. In it, he said, "I wish I had gotten to him sooner. I wish we had talked. I don't know what he saw up there. I don't know if it was in his head or if it was real. But I believe he went there to let go. And I believe he did." But not everyone agreed. Online forums exploded with theories. Some blamed Trevor, despite his confirmed alibi. Others accused the military of covering up Nolan's mental health record. But the most persistent theory came from a subset of wilderness mythologists and fringe survivalists, who pointed to the rune-like symbol in the cave and the whispered voice in the audio. They claimed Nolan had stumbled upon something ancient, something older than the Rockies themselves. One Reddit thread posted side-by-side comparisons of the symbol beneath the stone and carvings found in European glacial caves, suggesting a forgotten warning mark from alpine folklore. Others claimed the pressed flower in his journal, Delphinium glaucum, wasn't symbolic of death, but used in occult rituals meant to confuse or repel spiritual entities. As strange as those claims sounded, one unsettling fact remained. No wildlife had been observed near Nolan's remains. No bite marks. No scavenging. Not even insect activity. It was as if something kept nature away. And then came the final twist. 6 months after the last search party left Devil's Spine, during spring thaw, a ranger patrolling the lower basin found a second stone, smaller than the first, tucked beneath the roots of a downed tree nearly 2 miles from the original site. It bore no name, no message, just the same broken circle symbol, scratched deeper, rougher, and fresh enough to suggest it had been carved after Nolan's death. Investigators reopened the site briefly, but found no new remains, no new gear, no prints. Nothing else. And yet the implication was chilling. If Nolan had etched the first mark, who made the second one? Hale, now retired, keeps a photo of that second stone in a frame on his wall. When asked if he believes Nolan died alone, he answers without hesitation. "No. I think something else was there. I think it's still there." No official cause of death was ever determined for Nolan Drake. His body was never recovered, only fragments of his presence. His pack, his carving, his notebook, his voice. His disappearance was officially listed as presumed deceased due to environmental exposure. But that sterile phrase can't account for the carved forgiveness, the whispered audio, or the symbol that reappeared where no one should have been? What remains are questions, suspended in thin mountain air like breath on a cold morning. Was Nolan driven into the Rockies by grief? By guilt? Was he chasing peace? Or running from something darker? And perhaps the most disturbing question of all. Did he find what he was looking for? Or did it find him? His brother Trevor moved away from Colorado shortly after the second stone was discovered. Some say he changed his name. Others say he went off-grid entirely. Whatever the truth, he never spoke about Nolan again. Not publicly. Not privately. As if silence was the only way to honor what his brother had done, or witnessed. Ranger Hale retired 6 months later. He still hikes, but never near Devil's Spine. When asked if he'd ever go back to the exact site where Nolan vanished, he simply says, "No. Some places aren't meant to be revisited. Some goodbyes echo too loud." Today, hikers who venture off-trail near the ridge often report strange experiences. Equipment glitches, unexplained static, the sensation of being watched. Some dismiss it as altitude sickness or nerves. Others just turn back. And still, the stone remains. Weather-worn but untouched, deep in the shade of the cliff where the last trace of Nolan Drake was left behind. If you're reading this, I've already lost too much blood. Tell my brother I forgive him. A farewell not just to a sibling, but perhaps to the world itself. Maybe that's the truth buried beneath the carved granite and whispered rumors. Nolan Drake didn't simply vanish. He became part of the mountain. Not erased, but remembered in silence, stone, and snow.